Art Against Mental Illness.
Hello, everybody. Coming to you live today from my studio in the wilds of Scotland. The thermometer hanging from my ceiling here says it's 5 degrees, which is practically tropical compared to what it usually is in here, and it's a total fucking mess. I sort of despair a little bit. It'll get tidied up at some point, perhaps when it's a little bit bloody warmer. Although it does strike me that the time to tidy this place up is when it's a little bit cooler, because at least then I'll create some body heat. But I'm certainly not feeling hugely motivated at the moment. Why am I talking to you from my studio? Well, partly because I do this from time to time. I'm an artist, is what I do. I spend time in the studio. I've struggled to do that of late because it's so bleeding cold in here and damp, and I guess that's what I want to talk about a little bit. I'm not gonna bore you and depress you by talk about the Ragnarok of dreary weather we've been suffering here in Scotland. I have no doubt that most of the UK is having a similar issue, but it's not been pleasant, and we haven't had too much of the more interesting weather like snow or really beautiful frosty mornings and crisp blue skied days where it might be freezing but it's absolutely glorious. Now it's just been gloomy and it's just grey. My studio feels grey and it's been raining all the time, and this is my studio is like an old workshop, old workshop with crappy, probably asbestos corrugated ceilings and some windows that have gaps in them, and downstairs, I'm upstairs, but downstairs is a little bit close to some drainage, and overall it's just damp and dank in here, and unless it gets some sunshine on it, it just stays humid. The flip side to that is in the summer it gets unbearably hot, and so it's never too much winning in here. But I'm so lucky to have it, that I'm not really complaining per se. It just sometimes I struggle to build up the motivation to come out here and be absolutely freezing, and on top of that, nothing's drying. And that's as much to do with the general humidity as it is the cold, although neither are particularly helpful. And this is problematic for me because I work in acrylic paints, and there's a reason I work in acrylics, and that's because they dry quickly. And the way that I work, and this has taken me many years to learn, and many experiments with other mediums like oil paints, that I need things to dry. I'm such an imperfect and erratic painter. I don't really know what I'm going to make before I start making it. I make lots of mistakes, and even to the point where I encourage mistake making, because I get really interesting effects and it fuels my sort of ideas and experimentation engine. And I have no real mind's eye, so I sort of can't envision what I want before I start making it. So I sort of work very intuitively, and I find that oil paints and their extreme slow dryingness doesn't at all suit how I want and need to work. And then, other mediums like watercolor are just so unforgiving. So I tend to work with anything that's sort of more plastic or acrylic based and fast drying. So I do acrylic paints and collage with PVA glue and things like that in reasonable conditions will dry really quickly and are very forgiving mediums. And if I make the sort of mistake that's never going to be recoverable into something decent, I can just paint over it. And my paintings tend to be built up through layers and layers and layers of washes and glazes, and it's just how I've sort of settled into working. It's not for want of trying different approaches, but every single time I seem to come back to this way of working. So I can justify it however, I might see fit. There are many reasons I might explain as to why I work that way and why this is my technique and how I came to it. But the reality of it is that I just gravitate back towards the way of working. And every time I consciously move away from that, I tend to gravitate straight back to it. And it's how and where I feel comfortable. It's what I feel comfortable doing. And whether or not the results are, what people want to see, this is me. This is what I do, and this is what I like doing. And so I'm not immune to doing other things. It's just that this is my uh, fulcrum, and it's my comfort zone, and it's also a medium and a an approach that allows me to experiment and allows me to be quite, shall we say, erratic, aggressive, and generally quite brutal with my materials. It just suits who I am. And so when we get to this time of the year, and and it's cold and dank and damp, and nothing's drying, it really throws out the window how I want to work. And yeah, for sure, I could carve out a corner of my house and perhaps keep doing this stuff because it's at least a bit warmer in there and drier. But the other facet of my approach is that I'm quite messy. And I would just destroy our house and probably, um, you know, drive my wife and family completely to distraction. So I kind of have to work with the conditions that I've got. And the exact same thing happened last year, which was the first year that I had this studio. My studio that I had before had some semblance of insulation and was in general extremely dry. So although a lot of these problems were assailing me with that space, it was nowhere near as bad. But this is what I've got, and as I say, I'm not going to look the gift horse in the mouth because many people don't get to have a dedicated space at all. But it does mean that I have to change either the way that I work or the things that I am working on. I simply can't work the way that I'm used to working when it's like this. So as happened last year, I sort of slowly curtailed my more pictorial representative painting and forked off into two different things, one of which is woodworking. I'm not going to go too much into that today, but I've got piles of wood. I'm a real squirrel when it comes to picking up random bits of wood and taking them home with me. And so I'm always surrounded by bits of wood, old bits of tree branches and planks of wood that I've pulled out of skips and stuff. I just like to go at them with my carving tools, and I actually don't produce that much stuff when I'm doing woodworking. I did a whole bunch of sort of carving and stuff, and I'm okay at it, actually. It's fine. I really enjoy the process. I find it really relaxing. So I've not really produced much through the woodwork other than a whole bunch of sawdust this time round. But I'll keep going in and at it, going at it because I find it really, really relaxing. Um, but what the other thing that I ended up doing last year that I'm doing again now is a move into abstraction. And it was a bit subconscious, but why I'm really doing this is that I need a method of working that doesn't rely on fast drying. In fact, benefits from slow drying. And so what the other thing I love is I love working with acrylic inks and and just using texture and organic mixing and dripping and and just generally creating a wet canvas and just watching the drama of inks and paints unfolding as they mix and merge and dilute and pool and congeal and putting in different substances like PVA or varnish or all sorts of things, and then just letting it dribble. And I really don't want it to dry quickly. I want it to create to spread across the canvas and to create all these weird dribbly marbling effects that I absolutely adore. And I love it when I've made it and it's dried and it looks awesome, because sometimes they dry in weird cracked ways, but also I I just love watching it happen. I can just it's mesmerizing to me. And I just really enjoy it. I've never really understood abstraction. I struggle with it because I never know when something is done. I never know whether I really like it, because I don't really love other people's abstract works. And so I really love the process, but I don't know when to stop. And I often end up just overdoing things and turning it into a horrible mush because I'm enjoying the process too much. I just don't really stand back and look at what I've produced and whether or not I think it's good or not. And often when I ask myself that, I don't really know the answer, but I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's just something I made that has little patches of wonderfulness in it, and I really enjoyed doing. And in some respects, that's just my whole approach to art. But when I've produced a picture of a human face, I'll stand back and look at it and go, well, that I think looks good. Whereas when I've got a whole bunch of messy, blobby, marbled, squirrely stuff on a canvas or a bit of wood, it's sort of hard for me to get my head around what I've produced. Anyway, I, I think really my point here is less about abstraction, and I've been dancing around the idea of doing one or more episodes of this podcast on abstraction and sort of going on a little bit of an abstraction odyssey, which I think I will do. But it's not my point today. My point is sometimes you just got to work with the constraints you're given. Sometimes you've got to make the most of the situation you're in, even though it might be unsatisfactory. And those are the moments, I think, where you can be at your most creative, because as opposed to just sitting back and leaning into your comfort zone, which it might be happy, comforting and pleasant and relaxing, isn't really pushing you in any direction, and it isn't really furthering your work. And I think you can get quite bored and pedestrian and start to lose a bit of passion for your art if you're never varying it. I'm not here to tell you that the only good artists are ones that are constantly pushing boundaries, but all artists need to evolve. I think you just need to evolve, because otherwise it gets boring and it really shows in your work. You'll start to lose interest and it will start to show. And so every now and again, I think every artist needs to push themselves out of their comfort zone. And that doesn't mean to say you're going to do something wildly challenging. It just means, well, just try something different. Now, when is that moment to try something different? Well, for me, it's when doing the thing that I usually do becomes nigh on impossible. And so I start to move into abstraction and get a bit more of a feel for it. And I like to think that, although I certainly wouldn't particularly rate my abstract works particularly highly, I've certainly come a long way, and I think I've got more of a feel for how I like to make abstract works and a bit of a style developing. And when I look at some of my earlier abstract experiments, I really prefer what I've done now. I'd happily paint over those. And but I'm still not sure what I have is something concrete enough for me to want to put out there, to get people's opinions on, to try and sell or to promote. I'm not comfortable. I don't think I'm there yet. I think I've got a way to go, but I'm definitely moving in the right direction. And I just would have stopped by now were this a little experiment, because I'd be drawn straight back into my comfort zone. But my comfort zone isn't really viable at the moment. So here I am being forced to do things that are not necessarily the things that I would choose to do, and really enjoying it, and finding myself really challenged by what it is I'm trying to achieve and how that reflects on my wider body of work. And no doubt some of the things that I learn about my technique, my art, my use of materials, my approach to composition and stuff will make its way back into, the main body of my work. But slowly I'm starting to sort of learn and surface a bunch of stuff that starts to look like viable art in its own right. And to me, that's really exciting. And does this have my fingerprints all over it? Yes, of course it literally does, because I always get my hands dirty. But and it will have my signature on it at some point when I'm comfortable that it's something I wish to share. But I'm just not quite sure yet. In fact, I'm certain it isn't until that moment where I stand back and go, yes, that is the thing, that whatever that is what I wanted. Whatever that is something that I'm really happy and comfortable to share, that I want to do more of that. Then maybe that's the moment that I put my signature on one of these and start showing it to everyone. And I have not hit that point yet. And I've dig through some of my pieces that I did last winter when I was in a similar position, and they're pretty cool actually. And there's a lot of variation as I was sort of mixing up both woodworking and abstraction, and using a lot of wet materials and so on. I did some good stuff. I'm just not sure what it is. I'm not sure what it represents, and I need for my work to represent something. And none of these pieces are getting binned. Maybe some of them will be resurrected, and some of them might be incorporated into other works at some point. I don't throw anything away. But yeah, I mean, back to the core thesis of this podcast, it's the process that counts. And as much as I don't like being cold and damp, and I don't like not being able to do my favorite type of work, I'm really, really enjoying doing what I'm doing. And maybe at some point I'll actually start making it part of my main body of work. But I think for the rest of the year, I think it's just a lesson in rolling with the punches, as it were, with a lesson in doing the things that present themselves to you, regardless of, you know, whether or not it's the thing you would usually do or that you're comfortable with. I think use the conditions you're given, use the materials that you're given. If you don't have money to buy new materials, use what you've got there. Some stuff, some paints or some materials that you bought at another time for another project, but just sitting there unused because you wouldn't usually work with stuff like that. Well, use it. Paint over some old canvases, or, you know, dig out some old experimental short stories, or do whatever it is that gives you a sense of being able to move forward and to be able to do something, and just lean into the otherness of it. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't produce anything of value. This is not you changing everything up for permanent, for, you know, for good. It's just you spreading your wings a bit further and incorporating something new and interesting into your overall approach and style and technique. So anyway, I'm here, I'm freezing, it's raining, dreary and drizzly outside, and I'm just thinking about what other surfaces I've got that I can start dribbling ink and paint down, and how I can create texture and form from that, and sort of looking forward to doing it more. But you can damn well bet when the sun comes out, as we get into spring, things warm up a bit, I'll go back to the other stuff, but I'll go back with it with a
Art
bit of
against
renewed
mental illness.
vigor, with a fresh mind and fresh eyes, and a whole bunch of new techniques and approaches and ideas that I perhaps wouldn't have had otherwise. So maybe you want to do something similar, maybe not. Either way, I'm getting back to it. Enjoy. Bye.